My name is Melanie Voss. I'm 39, and for almost 2 decades, my mother had one line she pulled out at every family gathering. 2 Saturdays ago, at her 65th birthday, she pulled it out one last time. 72 guests packed the VFW Hall in Marion, Ohio. She lifted her champagne glass, tugged me toward her prayer group, and gave me the same tired smile she'd been giving me since I was 19. "This is my late bloomer," she said. Still figuring out what she wants to do with her life. The room laughed, the polite laugh people give when they don't know what else to do. And that's when the side door swung open, and a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit walked in like he owned the building. 74 years old. Half the room recognized him instantly, because his last name was stitched onto the awning of 152 stores across 3 states. He wasn't there by accident. He was there for me. And what happened in the next 15 minutes didn't just interrupt my mother's toast, it dismantled a story she'd been telling about me for 20 years. A story, it turned out, someone in that room had been quietly rewriting behind my back, on purpose, for a very long time. Let me rewind to last October, back to the season I finally stopped trying to win my family over, and started keeping score instead. It began the way it always did. First Sunday of the month, the 2-hour drive from Columbus up to Marion. People go to the dentist with less dread than I brought to that drive. You go because it's expected. You leave a little smaller than when you arrived. My alarm goes off at 4:45 most days. By 6, I'm walking the floor of a distribution center that could swallow 4 Walmart supercenters, deciding which trucks go where, so 152 hardware stores open on time with full shelves. That's been some version of my job for 15 years. My family had no idea. In their heads, I worked the register at the hardware store. Singular. Vest, name tag, the whole picture. My mother loved that version. It matched the story she'd been telling since I turned 19. I drove past the old grain silo, past the church where my mother had held her seat in the second pew for 40 years, and pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. White clapboard, my father's garage sitting dark out back, locked up since we buried him 5 years ago. I grabbed the cake from the bakery on 3rd Street, answered a shipping question from our Tennessee stores, and walked up the porch steps I'd climbed my whole life. From inside, I could already hear my brother Curtis's voice, big and bright, telling a story where he was the hero. Remember that voice. It matters later. Sunday dinner at my mother's runs like a church pageant with assigned roles. Curtis, 42, sits in my father's old chair and performs. That night his story was about landing some big client for his insurance office, complete with hand gestures. His wife Renee sat quietly beside him, cutting up food for their twins, Josh and Ellie. My mother, Diane, watched her son the way some people watch a sunset. Then her attention swung to me, just long enough to dim the room. "Melanie's still at the hardware store," she said to nobody in particular. "Some people find their little corner and just stay there." She patted my hand when she said it. That's the thing nobody understands about my mother, the cruelty always wore a costume of affection. Halfway through dessert, a neighbor named Pam stopped by, returning a casserole dish, and my mother marched her in to say it again, smooth as a hymn she'd sung 1,000 times. Pam laughed the way people laugh when they're holding an empty dish and don't know where to put their eyes. What I noticed, driving home in the dark, was that Pam never once asked what I actually did for a living. Nobody ever did. My mother's introduction always answered the question first. Monday morning, 5:50, I badged into the Columbus Distribution Center while the sky still looked like wet cement. By 6:15, I'd rerouted 2 trucks around a highway closure, approved an emergency generator for our flooded store in Zanesville, and talked a warehouse supervisor out of quitting. Nearly 300 people report up through me, one way or another. My actual title is Vice President of Operations for Pruitt Hardware and Supply, a privately held chain with 152 stores and just north of $400 million in revenue last year, a number we don't say out loud very often. Cashier at 21, because it was the only job that called me back. Bookkeeper at 23. Store manager at 27. Regional director at 30. Vice president at 34. Nobody handed me a single rung of that ladder. That same morning, Harold Pruitt walked the warehouse floor, the way he still did most Mondays. 74 years old, wandering the aisles of his own life's work, built 46 years ago out of a single feed and hardware storefront. His wife passed years back. He lost his only son young, and he never talks about it. He stopped at my clipboard, looked over my numbers, and said, "You're the quietest fix I ever hired, Voss." That was the whole compliment. That was the truth of who I really was, the version with the paperwork behind it. My family had no idea it existed. For years I thought that silence was my own choice. It took most of this story for me to understand it had a partner working against me the whole time. Somebody had been filling the space I left empty, not with nothing, but with a version of me built to fail. Here's why I stopped bringing good news home. The year I turned 25, Pruitt promoted me to bookkeeper, my first salaried job, benefits, a real desk. I said so out loud at Thanksgiving. My mother set down her fork and said, they gave her a calculator because she can't handle customers. The table laughed. Curtis laughed hardest. Better count fast, Mel, before they count you out. I watched my one piece of good news get melted down into a joke in under a minute. That was my education. Every fact I brought into that house came out the other side, sharpened into a weapon. So I ran a quiet experiment. I stopped reporting anything, no promotions, no salary, no square footage. If their picture of me was built entirely on information I supplied, cutting off the supply should freeze the story where it stood. For a few years, I believed it worked. Then, slowly, the story started moving on its own, and not in a good direction. By 30, the family's version of me wasn't just modest, she was struggling, barely scraping by. Lucky they even kept her on. I hadn't fed that story a crumb in 6 years, and somehow it had gotten bigger, meaner, more specific. Somebody else had kept talking for me, in a version that suited them. Every family has one safe person, and mine was my cousin Kayla, 37, my Aunt Bev's daughter, a year behind me in school and decades ahead of everyone else in the art of listening. We had a standing coffee date, first Saturday of every month, at a cafe on High Street. Kayla got the real version of my life, the only person who did. When I made regional director at 30, she clinked her mug against mine. When I bought my house at 33, a bungalow with a wraparound porch, paid off free and clear, she toasted me with a scone. When my mother's introductions calcified into their permanent shape, Kayla told me, "She's wrong about you, Mel. Someday everyone's going to know it." I mistook that gift for love when I should have recognized it as a skill. Looking back, the signs were there. Kayla asked questions with edges hidden inside them. A promotion like that, the money must finally be real, huh? What did the house end up running you? At the time, it felt like a cheerleader wanting details. So do scouts. I told her almost everything, and drove home lighter every time. The first crack showed up over a pot roast in early December. My mother landed on something new. I don't know why a person rents when she could be saving. Though I suppose when you overpay for a little house on the east side, there's nothing left over to save. I kept my face still. I had never told her I bought a house, never told her the neighborhood. She had the east side right, and the price wrong. Inflated, the kind of number a story lands on after passing through a couple of hands, each one rounding up a little more. Exactly 2 people on earth knew what I paid for that house, my closing attorney, and Kayla. The next Saturday, I asked her straight out. She didn't flinch. I'd replay that later. Mel, you probably said something at Thanksgiving. You know how you get, and your mom fishes. It was plausible. That's the thing about good liars, they hand you the boring explanation and let you carry it home yourself. I carried it. But I also started quietly tracking what my family knew, and when they knew it. Every leak has a source. You just have to map the water. A week before Christmas, Curtis stood up at dinner like the table was a podium. I've taken over all of Mom's accounts. Every statement, every bill runs through me now. Somebody in this family has to step up. His eyes landed on me when he said, somebody. My mother squeezed his wrist with both hands. Thank God for my son. I'd have lost this house years ago without him. I did the math I always do instead of screaming. 5 years since Dad died. 5 years of Curtis handling everything. A man whose insurance office had downsized twice in that stretch. A man driving a brand new pickup he'd bought the same spring my mother started saying money was tight. Bookkeepers notice when the outflow doesn't match the lifestyle, and I was noticing. I should tell you about my father here, because he matters more than I understood at the time. Walt Voss repaired farm and construction equipment for almost 40 years. Quiet man, married to a loud woman, and he survived it the way quiet men do, by having somewhere to disappear to. His was the garage. When I made store manager at 27, I never told the family. But one Saturday, I looked up from behind the counter of my store in Delaware, Ohio, and there he was, near the paint display, hands in his pockets. He never waved. He walked one slow lap around my store, looking over the shelves like a man inspecting a weld, and left. We never spoke about it. That silent lap remains one of the best conversations of my life. 5 years ago, cancer took him fast, 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. Near the end, he took my hand and said, "Take care of your mother. Even when she makes it hard." I've kept that promise every year since, in a way nobody at that dinner table ever saw. What you need to understand, the person getting credit for taking care of my mother was Curtis. The person actually doing it was the late bloomer. And in a toolbox sitting in a garage that hadn't been opened in 5 years, my father had left something behind that proved he'd known exactly who I was, exactly what was coming, and exactly which one of his children could count. Christmas draws a bigger crowd, and a bigger crowd means a bigger stage. Over dinner, Curtis cleared his throat and produced his gift to the room. Heard something concerning, he said, concern being a suit he wore to parties. Buddy of mine's corporate adjacent to Pruitt. Layoffs coming, cutting deep in the stores. You should probably update your resume, Mel. The table murmured sympathetically. There were no layoffs. There was no plan for layoffs. 11 days earlier, I had signed off on the capital budget for 4 new store openings. I knew our headcount down to the person. The rumor was aimed on purpose, close enough to plausible to land, targeted right at the one thing my family thought they understood about me. I ate my green beans and said, "Thanks, Curtis. I'll keep an eye out." Kayla caught my eye across the table with a look of warm sympathy, and I remember feeling grateful for her. Sit with that, because I had the whole map upside down. The drive home takes 2 hours, and I spent all of it taking Curtis's rumor apart like a bad invoice. In my line of work, when a number's wrong, it's wrong one of 2 ways. Sloppy wrong is random. Deliberate wrong has a shape, wrong in a direction, wrong toward a purpose. Curtis's story pre-explained any future where I lost my job. It made my silence at dinner look like fear instead of choice. That was the night I stopped calling the family story about me a misunderstanding, and started calling it what it was, authored. Misunderstandings drift. This had craftsmanship behind it. Over the following weeks, I ran my own quiet audit. My mother repeated things about me with details I'd never once said inside that house, my company's health plan, mangled but recognizable. A cousin asked if I'd been written up again. Every false thing carried the same fingerprints, close to a truth I'd told somebody, twisted half a turn, aimed downward. I know a leak when I feel one, and you don't catch it by yelling at the water. You catch it by putting dye in the pipe and watching where the color comes out. I wasn't ready yet. But the thought had arrived, sat down at the table, and stayed there. In January, at the twins' bowling alley birthday, my mother introduced me to Renee's parents the same way. My late bloomer, every family's got one. Renee's father laughed the way you laugh when a stranger hands you something ugly. Ellie, 9 years old, frosting on her chin, tugged my sleeve and asked what a late bloomer was. I told her it's a word for when something takes a person longer to figure out than other people expected. She considered that with her whole face. Like when a flower's just late. Exactly like that. I stood back up and made a decision I'd been circling for months. I wasn't going to perform for these people anymore. I also wasn't going to blow anything up in front of those kids. But the audit was over. Whatever came next was going to be arithmetic. Now let me tell you how I kept my promise to my father. My mother's house runs about $4,200 a year in property taxes. 5 years ago, I heard her tell Aunt Bev she didn't know how she'd manage them on Dad's pension alone. So I managed it, every September and every March, out of my own checking account, anonymous as far as she knew. $24,000 in change over 5 years, and I never said a word, because saying a word in that family turns a gift into a target. Then, one February coffee at the church hall, my mother told 3 Bible study ladies, glowing, "Curtis handles all my taxes, every penny. I'd have lost this house without him. That boy is my rock." I sat 4 feet away holding a paper cup of weak coffee, the actual rock, the anonymous treasurer, and said nothing, because what was there to say that wouldn't sound insane? A cold, clear question walked into my head that afternoon and never left. If Curtis tells her he pays the taxes, what's actually happening to her money? I did the responsible thing first. I asked my mother if I could look over her bank statements, just a second set of eyes. She went from 0 to biblical in 4 seconds. "You're questioning your brother. Curtis has a license. You think you can audit him from a hardware store register?" I let it go. I called our hometown bank and asked what it would take to be added as a viewer on her accounts. The woman on the phone was kind and completely immovable, privacy law, and without my mother present and consenting, I couldn't see so much as a balance. "Is there a POA on file?" A pause. "I can't discuss the account, ma'am." Which was, itself, an answer. The door wasn't just closed. It was locked from the inside, by people I loved, one of whom was being robbed, and the other of whom I'd have bet my house was doing the robbing. It started with party planning. My mother wanted the garage cleared out, and my father's old equipment sold, to help fund the 65th. I got assigned the garage, dirty work nobody else wanted. I didn't argue. Honestly, I wanted it. It was the last room of my father left on this earth. I spent a whole Saturday sorting socket sets and coffee cans of bolts. Under the workbench, behind seized-up carburetors, I found his old toolbox, rust-freckled, locked, no key anywhere. Untouched for 5 years. I loaded it into my trunk and was closing the hatch when my phone rang. "Kayla. Heard you're doing the garage today. Find anything good?" I'd been in that garage 4 hours. I hadn't told a single soul. "Just rushed," I said. It was the second time I ever lied to Kayla, and it already felt like practice. That night, at my kitchen table, I cut the lock off with bolt cutters. The top tray held wrenches, arranged by size, the way he arranged everything. Underneath, where a man keeps the things that are actually his, there were no tools at all. Newspaper clippings, dozens of them, cut square with his pocket knife, going back 16 years, the grand opening of the Delaware store with me mid-laugh in the crowd, a business page brief with my name buried in a list, a ribbon cutting, a trade paper piece with my name tucked into the 11th paragraph. My father had been keeping receipts on my life for 16 years, clipping the evidence of me the way other men clip coupons. At the bottom sat an envelope, "For Mel, when you're ready." He wrote that he was never good at saying things out loud in that house, and figured I'd find my way to the toolbox eventually, because I was the only one who'd ever bother to clean the garage. I know exactly who you are. Being quiet about a good thing doesn't make it less good. And then, in darker ink, like he'd come back to the page a second time, "One more job for you, Mel. Watch your mother's money. I don't trust where it's going. You're the only one in this family who knows how to count." Grief locks the drawer on memory, and my father's letter picked that lock. The month after the funeral, Curtis at the kitchen table with a folder and a pen already uncapped, "Just some authorizations so I can handle things for you." I thought it was kind. The next spring, Curtis's new truck in the driveway, the same week my mother said money felt tight. The year after, Curtis and Renee off to the coast for 10 days, the same season my mother mentioned taking out a little something against the house for a new roof, a roof I drove past every month for 2 years, same brittle shingles, never touched. 1 coincidence. 2, a pattern. 3, with a power of attorney quietly on file, a business model. I had no statements, nothing a lawyer could frame into a case. What I had was a dead man's handwriting telling me to watch, and 5 years of watching I'd already done without knowing it. Enough to act on. Not yet enough to win with. So I kept my voice level, and waited for the arithmetic to surface. In families like mine, it always surfaces at an event. While all this simmered, my actual life kept moving, and my actual life had Harold Pruitt in it. In April, over the meatloaf special, he asked, "If this company were yours, what's the one thing you'd never change?" Not what would you change, what would you protect? The Monday walk, I said. The founder walking his own floor. The day leadership stops smelling the warehouse is the day the numbers start lying to them. He nodded once, slow, the way he nods at a pallet stacked correctly, and changed the subject. Old men move like winter, slow, and then all at once. The garage got noticed. The next Sunday, Curtis did a slow appraiser's turn through the emptied space and asked, too casually, "What about the old man's toolbox? Anything worth money in there?" I looked at my brother and saw the whole board laid out. He knew the toolbox existed. He didn't know what was inside it, and some instinct, the same one that had him planting layoff rumors, made him want inventory on anything he didn't control. Just Dad's junk. Kept it for sentiment. That was the first deliberate lie I ever told him, and it felt like putting on safety glasses. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been a suspicious sister with no standing. Now I was my father's appointed auditor, holding a written mandate in a dead man's own hand. For the first time in this story, I knew something Curtis didn't. My mother called a family dinner in May to unveil the party plans. VFW Hall, 72 guests, catered barbecue, a banner reading, Diane, 65 years young. Curtis will give the toast, she announced, touching his shoulder like she was knighting him. Then, to me, with the bright smile of a woman handing out the last job in the room, and Melanie will handle cleanup after. You're so good at that. Doesn't need any presents. The family laughed the gentle laugh of a joke aged 20 years. I said cleanup was fine, and meant it, because some part of me had stopped attending these dinners as a daughter, and started attending them the way you'd sit through a deposition, noting, filing, letting the record build itself. 72 guests. Her entire audience. A stage that size doesn't care who it was built for. It amplifies whoever's telling the truth. 2 days later, Harold's assistant called to ask whether I could come by Tuesday morning. No agenda attached. I hung up and stood at my kitchen window a long time, finally letting myself name the feeling. The first Saturday of June, Kayla went fishing at Coffee, 7 layers of casual. Weird thing, somebody told my mom Pruitt's founder is stepping down, picking a successor. That's your company, right? There had been no announcement, no press. The only people on earth who knew Harold's intentions were Harold, his attorney, and, as of 4 days earlier, me. And Aunt Bev, who thinks a Roth IRA is a horse breed, had somehow heard about it clear over in Dayton. The information wasn't leaking out of Pruitt. It was flowing toward me, and Kayla's version of where the question came from was the tell. I said. First I'm hearing of it. Then I dropped my voice into the confiding register I'd used with her for 12 years. Honestly, don't repeat this, but I might get transferred. Nebraska. Haven't told Mom yet. Kayla's face did sympathy beautifully. We hugged goodbye like always. Then I sat in my car and set a timer in my head. Die in the pipe. Now we watched the water. It took 8 days. At Sunday dinner, my mother set down the gravy boat. Well, I hear you're being shipped off to Nebraska. Even your own company wants you somewhere else. Fork stopped clinking. Curtis leaned back, studying me with what he must have believed was a poker face. My word. My fake, planted once, with one person, in a cafe on High Street. 9 days later, coming out of my mother's mouth with gravy steam still rising off it. The pipeline was real, and it had a name, and the name was Kayla. I felt gutted more than clever. Nebraska isn't settled, I said evenly, and changed the subject to the seating chart. The Tuesday went like this. Harold's attorney was already there, and on the desk sat a document as thick as a hymnal. 15 years I've watched you count everything that matters, Harold said. The freight, the people, the days. Never once yourself. He turned the document to face me. Succession agreement. My name in the first paragraph. President and Chief Executive Officer, effective upon execution of the stock transfer. I asked him why not a search firm. Search firms find good talkers. I need an operator. The quietest fix I ever hired. Then the terms, signing 2.5 weeks out, a Friday at 5, press release the following Monday at 9. And one condition. Before Monday, I meet your family. Family tells you what a person's really made of, when nobody's clapping for them. I told him my mother's 65th was that Saturday. Good. Then Saturday. From that Tuesday forward, I walked through my family's insults carrying a secret worth 9 figures. 20 years of data told me that any good news released into that house came back re-engineered as a weapon within a month. So the plan was silence, signature, and a press release with my name spelled correctly. Let the trade papers make the introduction my family never would. Wednesday, my mother asked me to dig up her birth certificate for a Medicare form, and that errand cracked the vault. In the family lockbox, on top of the certificate, sat a home equity line of credit against the house I grew up in. Balance, $96,000. A past due notice beneath it. And 5 years of IRA distribution summaries, each one a bucket lowered into my mother's retirement and hauled back up empty. Mom, this line of credit, what's this for? That's Curtis's paperwork, the refinancing. He has a license, Melanie. She went to make tea, done with the subject. I read the way I'm trained to, dates, amounts, signatures. Hers, real, her own pen. No forgery, nothing a prosecutor could sink teeth into. Just a trusting widow signing whatever her rock put in front of her, 5 years running. Around $170,000 gone, plus a mortgage reborn on a house paid off free and clear. Thursday evening, I laid it all out for Curtis, flat and quiet, like a freight manifest. Return what you can, on a schedule. Close the line of credit. Hand back the power of attorney, and mom's accounts get a professional, neutral set of eyes. Do that, and this stays a family matter. He listened with his boots up on the desk and smiled. Prove it. Those are mom's signatures. Her money, her choices, her licensed advisor. Who's going to take your word over mine? You're the family screw-up, remember. 20 years, one story. He walked me to the door and added, careful, Mel. Mom only has one story about you. Don't make me add a chapter. Friday morning, an elder law attorney confirmed exactly what I'd feared: voluntary signatures, no forgery, no easy criminal case with a trusting widow as the star witness against her own son. But there was a civil path: revoke the power of attorney if my mother was willing, freeze the accounts, close the credit line, trace every dollar, negotiate restitution with actual teeth. Every step legal. Every step fatal to Curtis's little kingdom. And every step required one thing I didn't have: my mother's consent. Friday afternoon, Harold called himself. Tomorrow. Your family. Anything I should know walking in. I told him the truth, all of it, 15 years of keeping 2 lives in separate trucks, unloaded onto his desk 3 hours before he signed over his entire legacy. The line went quiet. Then, my father told me I'd fail at everything but drinking. I built the first store just to spite him, and the next 100 because it turned out I was good at it. A pause. Then Saturday, I won't just meet your family. I'll meet my company's first real test. At 5 o'clock, we signed. No speeches, that's the thing nobody tells you about the biggest moments of your life. Pages turning, a fountain pen scratching my name into the spine of a 46-year-old company. Congratulations, Madam President. In the elevator down, Harold cracked a smile with real mischief in it. Had my girl call your mother's RSVP line. Told them a friend of Melanie's from work might stop in. Nice lady said, anyone from the hardware store is welcome, there's a table near the kitchen. Thursday night, Curtis hadn't been idle. He called a family dinner of his own and told them, heavy and reluctant, that Pruitt had let me go that week, the Nebraska thing had fallen through, and please don't humiliate her on Mom's night. Aunt Bev had it on the phone tree within the hour. By Friday morning, my unemployment was congregation-wide fact, garnished with prayer requests. Speak up now, and it's my word against the family's 20-year archive, with Curtis holding 48 hours to spin and bury it. Stay silent, and I walk into the party as the poor jobless disappointment. I chose the apron. Every inch he added to my humiliation was just altitude for his own fall. Saturday, 3:30, I was setting round tables for 72 in the good apron when Kayla arrived early, eyes jumpy. Mel, I heard about the job. Are you calm? You seem so calm. 12 years, Kayla had been the pipeline feeding my private truths to the story factory, and the product had always come back matching her intel. Now the product was off. I'm fine, I said, and handed her a stack of napkins. Guests arrived at 6:72 exactly. Curtis worked the crowd in a sport coat, tapping the microphone, testing it like a man who'd waited his whole life for sanctioned amplification. At 7:52, my mother lifted her glass. She thanked the pastor, the choir, Pam and the flowers. She toasted Curtis, my rock, my right hand, and the room raised their glasses to my brother, who bowed his head in a flawless imitation of humility. Then her eyes found me by the kitchen doors. Melanie, come up here, honey. Don't hide. 72 faces turned. I set down the coffee pot and walked to the front, because you don't brawl at a birthday party. For half a second, some 10-year-old still living inside my chest thought, maybe tonight it's different. Then she smiled her hostess smile. And this is my late bloomer. Still figuring out what she wants to do with her life. Every family's got one. Mine just never quite grew out of it. The laughter came, scattered and obedient. Ellie didn't laugh. She sat with her fists on the table, watching me. Over the laughter, I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot. I stepped down while my mother moved into her thank yous, and Kayla intercepted me by the hallway, 2 glasses of wine deep, vibrating. Mel, before tonight gets worse, I thought you should hear it from me. 12 years compressed into 90 seconds. The coffees. Curtis, who'd helped her with a car loan once, rent another time, and after that the questions had come with strings attached. Then the sentence that rearranged my skeleton. Your mom knows about your promotions. The big one, years ago. I told her myself. I thought she'd finally be proud, and she just went quiet. Then she said, if that's true, then what does that make me? And she kept introducing you the exact same way anyway. She needed the story, Mel. She needed you to be the one who failed. 7 years. My mother had known the truth for 7 years, and chosen the introduction over the information, every single time. Thank you for finally telling me the truth, I said, my voice level, which surprised us both. You're 12 years late. I stepped past her, and the double doors were opening. Harold Pruitt walked into my mother's birthday party at 8:03. The party noise died in rings, table by table. Half those guests were hardware people. Somebody said, too loud in the hush, that's Harold Pruitt. Curtis, still holding the microphone, made the last confident mistake of his reign. He strode over, hand out, salesman's smile at full wattage. Welcome, sir. Curtis Voss, a financial consultant. Friend of the family. Harold took his hand the way you take a flyer from a stranger, looked at him for exactly 1 second, and said, no. Then he scanned the tables until he found me in my apron, and crossed the entire hall while 72 people watched in total silence. He took the coffee pot right out of my hand, set it down, and turned to face the room. Forgive an old man for crashing a birthday party. But I couldn't wait until Monday. A hand on my shoulder, light, formal, the way you present a colleague. 46 years ago, I built a company out of one feed-in hardware store. Monday, the papers tell the whole state who's taking it from here. But I'm old-fashioned. I think families should hear it before the newspapers do. He looked directly at my mother when he said family. His hand tightened, just slightly. So meet her now. Melanie Voss. 15 years with my company. Cashier to bookkeeper to running every store I own. My successor. The next president and chief executive officer of Pruitt Hardware and Supply. The finest operator I've met in half a century. A beat of pure vacuum. Then the room detonated. Applause started at the tradesmen's tables and rolled forward until it filled the hall. Ellie stood on her chair and screamed, Aunt Mel, with both fists in the air, and nobody really tried to grab her. My mother turned around slowly, glass still raised, a thin line of champagne sliding over her knuckles. For the first time in 20 years, my mother had no introduction ready. Harold leaned toward me under the applause. Your father bought his very first wrench from my very first store. Then he handed me the microphone. Thank you, Harold. Mom, happy 65th. For 20 years, you've introduced me as your late bloomer. I stopped correcting you a long time ago, because I learned something in this family. The truth doesn't need an introduction. It just needs time. 15 years, 4:45 every morning. That's what I made of myself. I let it stay quiet a moment, because every face in that room had earned it. Then I turned to my brother, who'd gone the color of the tablecloth. Monday at 9, the press release goes out. Right after, a formal records request goes to the bank, attorneys attached. You know which records. Curtis shot up out of his chair with a bark of laughter that convinced nobody. This is a stunt. She's been lying her whole life, and he heard it, heard the exact sentence he'd built his fortress on collapsing in his own mouth in front of 72 witnesses. His chair tipped and cracked against the floor. Nobody moved to right it. What actually broke Curtis wasn't me. It was Renee. She stood, still gripping Ellie's hand. Tell them about the line of credit, Curtis. Tell them about the $96,000 against your mother's house. Tell them about my kids' college fund. She was crying and completely steady at once. I found the statements in March. I kept waiting for it to be a mistake. Curtis looked around that hall, his church, his clients, his in-laws, and made his choice. He grabbed his sport coat off the broken chair and walked out the door as Harold had come through, and the June evening swallowed him whole. My mother hadn't moved through any of it. I walked over and set an envelope beside her cake. Property tax receipts. 5 years, paid from my account, every installment since Dad died. You never lost this house, Mom, because your late bloomer kept the roof on it. Her hand went to the envelope and stopped. Inside, alongside the receipts, sat a photocopy of a letter in a mechanic's handwriting. Dad knew. Now you do. I looked at Kayla, gray-faced by the hallway. I won't tell your mother. That ledger's yours to balance. She caught me in the parking lot, of course. You did this at my birthday. You planned this whole circus. Then her voice cracked right down the middle, and out came a sentence I've turned over every day since. If I called you nothing, she said, barely above the gravel, then staying and taking it all didn't make me nothing either. For one breath, she was just a person, and I saw her, and it cost me something to keep my spine exactly where it was. I'll pay for the forensic accountant. And the elder law attorney. They'll call you Monday. Take the help or don't, the house and the accounts can still be saved. That part's your choice now. I opened my car door. But the introductions are over, Mom. You will never introduce me again. From now on, I introduce myself. Monday, 9 a.m., the press release went out, and my phone turned into a slot machine. I let it all ring, and spent the morning walking store number 1 with Harold, the only press conference either of us actually wanted. The unglamorous machinery did its work in the weeks that followed. My mother took the help, fear of losing the house finally outrunning fear of losing the story. The power of attorney got revoked, the accounts frozen and moved, the line of credit closed. The forensic accountant mapped 5 years of Curtis into 11 pages. Facing a civil suit in a room full of witnesses, my brother signed a restitution agreement that will follow him well into old age, supervised, documented, legal. He sold the truck by August. His office moved to a smaller strip mall a second time. Renee filed for separation, took the twins, and rented a place near their school. The first personal thing I did as president was walk into a bank with her and open 2 new college accounts, funded and untouchable, in the kids' names only. Josh and Ellie don't inherit their father's ledger. Not while I'm the one keeping the books. Kayla wrote me a 4-page letter. I answered with one line, start telling the truth for free. It suits you. We haven't had coffee since. My mother, 3 months after the party, on an ordinary Tuesday, called me. No introduction, no audience, just a long quiet, and then, the furnace man came by. Thank you. We talked for 4 minutes about the weather and the twins. It wasn't an apology. I've stopped billing for those. But it was, for the first time in my entire adult life, a conversation between 2 people, neither one of them a disappointment. When it ended, she said, "Good night, Melanie," and my own name sounded almost new coming out of her mouth. Here's what 20 years of being introduced wrong taught me, and it fits in one sentence. The only introduction that ever mattered was the quiet one I gave myself every single morning at 4:45. Show up, count what's true, and let time read it out loud.